So I'm assuming by now we've all seen the footage of the press conference in which Rudy Giuliani, America's favorite lawyer's hair dye is sweating down the side of his face on TV.
Yeah. Yep. Sure did.
I did see that.
I did not have technology today, so I've missed this. So
it's fantastic. He's his usual kind of like sweaty, nervous kind of deal. You know, all of his press conferences all the time, every time he's on TV, it's like a mob boss who is clearly guilty, like on the stand giving a testimony, you know, and this is no different, except this time his hair is freshly dyed. And so halfway through, you see like these little streams of hair of like brown sweat go like dripping down the side of his face. It's happening on both sides. So this is the part that everybody saw, right? But then I also saw something. I saw somebody pointed this out in a video on Twitter that I don't think made all the rounds. There is also a point at which there's another woman there. I think it's another one of Trump's lawyers or somebody who's trying to tell Pennsylvania to throw out all the votes or whatever it is they're doing. She's talking, and off to the side, Rudy Giuliani, the ex-mayor of New York City, takes out a Kleenex. He blows his nose into the Kleenex, and then he folds it the wrong way so that the snotty, boogery side is on the outside. And he takes it, and you can verify this. This is on video. It was on the news. He then wipes the snotty, boogery side of the tissue on the outside of his nose.
Oh my God.
Lips, and over his head while she's giving her talk. It is absolutely breathtaking. Like, what a month to be Rudy Giuliani. Are we still in the month where Borat embarrassed Rudy Giuliani?
I think so, yeah.
Yes, I think so.
I don't know how much crazier this can all get.
What will Rudy do next?
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely not guessing that it won't.
Wait, why?
Apparently, the New York Times has hairstylists weighing in, and the headline is, whatever it is, it's probably not hair dye. And a bunch of hairdressers weigh in on Rudy Giuliani's drip problem. I just because I didn't hear about this until we got on here. I just pulled it up. So apparently, we should enjoy.
This man used to be a respected lawyer. He was the mayor of New York City.
During 9/11, correct?
Yeah. And now he's like doing press conferences outside of landscaping businesses and outside of Philly and like whatever the hell just happened today.
He's like literally, now he's like basically a pedophile on camera as of the Borat movie.
Oh my God. Oh my God.
Incredible.
I mean, what a time.
I'll tell you what, if I run into legal trouble, I fucking know who I'm calling.
I know people don't like to call like Trump and them fascists, but like
who doesn't like to call them fascists?
I think there are some folks that don't. There's some folks, leftists actually, that don't. But I think like it's like they would be if they had any iota of just, I don't know, like the ability to do anything.
Honestly, like Giuliani is a perfect lawyer for Trump. Like if you kind of like take a few steps back and like look at it from a more abstract angle, they're perfect for each other.
Yeah, he's charging him $20,000 a day.
Oh
incredible.
God. Wait,
the grift is going in all circles. Yeah.
That's so jank.
Okay.
I mean,
I love jank.
Yeah, incredible. Absolutely incredible.
Amazing. Yeah. It's an amazing day for the news.
Well, I'm just going to soak it in while I can if we only have 2 more months of this. So, let's just like, only good things can happen.
You never know, man. Like the way it's going, Joe Biden might like appoint him to be the head of his environmental protection program or something. We might only be at the beginning of the next 4 years.
All right, then, fingers crossed.
Yeah. Can't wait.
You're just sunshine and rainbows today, Skylar. Thank you.
Oh, I mean, you know me. When it comes to Joe Biden, I get really positive and optimistic.
I know you're his biggest fan, so you're obviously really excited about him.
The Joe Biden hat is at the dry cleaners tonight. So
Yeah.
Skylar couldn't wear it.
This show's just going to become basically Pod Save America.
Oh shit!
For sure,
Wow.
love that.
So that snapped me out of whatever it was, my Stockholm syndrome, and I will bid you adieu.
Flo and I will be finding other Monday and Thursday night activities.
Correct.
Pod Safe America is brought to you by Simply Safe.
Nope,
Simply Safe.
Let's make you to leave.
All right, should we get started?
Yeah, let's do this podcast instead.
Let's do the yeah.
Fine.
Voices, the things they said. Voices, some from those dead. All the voices heard. Voices, things we say. Voices, they're in your head. All the voices heard.
Hello, everyone. You have Kempa.
And Skylar.
And Shannon.
And Flo.
And two very special guests today who I'm very excited to have on. We have Ayotunde Ikuku and Ome Tieu of the Gender Health Center. How you doing today? Oh my God, I didn't even give your titles.
No, they have cool titles. Let's do the
You
titles.
gotta say the titles.
Definitely the titles.
Ayotunde is the Community Engagement and Project Lead, and Ome is the Director of Operations over at Gender Health Center. So they're running things. So yeah, how are you doing? How you? Thanks for coming on.
I'm doing pretty good. It's been, Corona day. I have Corona brain, so I'm taking the day slow, and it's the end of the day, thankfully. So, been good.
It's been a pretty cool day, kind of just vibing, work stuff. But as far as this year, it's just been a chaotic mess.
Oh my God, all around, yeah.
That seems to be the thoughts across the board on this year.
Yeah, would agree.
Yeah, so listeners know I've had a very weird one the last 24 hours. I have spilled coffee on my computer. I am using a loaner right now, and I am all over the place. But I'm sure I'm just glad I got on tonight. We were kind of prepping so that I might not actually be here, so I'm just pumped. So why don't we just dive right into it? Tell the listeners, what is the Gender Health Center, and kind of how did it come to be what it is today?
The Gender Health Center, I've been there a little bit of time. Ayotunde's been there a little longer than I have. But it is essentially a one-stop shop for trans folks to kind of come get some services that are pretty essential that are not offered with cultural competency, or rather trans competency abroad. So like a lot of our, I know it sounds like really confusing, but like the gist of it is that like we offer accessibility. So for folks to be able to like get hormones, we have a program called advocacy, and this advocacy program teaches folks how to navigate primary care providers and all of that. And then we also have a counseling program that helps folks get therapy, and we educate these therapists with trans competency throughout the staff, and they meet the staff and they learn a lot from us, and we then apply that the ethics of what they've learned into the actual therapy process. And so we have that program as well. And then we also have a needle exchange and respite. And respite is exactly what it sounds like. It's for unhoused folks, and it focuses on trans folks. And recently we've changed our mission to kind of center trans folks of color with a special emphasis on Black folks, just because of the state of the world and how much harm Black folks experience in comparison to all other people of color, and especially trans people of color. So that's kind of like what we are. I think I could probably tell you a little bit more about how we came to be.
Yeah. Thank you for explaining the services. I was like, What do we do? There's so many things, so many hats.
Like every
Yeah, I went on the website to kind of prep for this and was like, oh, they do that. Oh, and they also do that and that and that and that and that and that.
Do everything.
We're out here working. But as far as like, I'll try to do like a TLDR of the history of GHC. It essentially started out as a way to give back to the trans community from a cisgender person who was positively impacted through her work with the trans community as she was pursuing her medical education. Her name was Danelle Saldana. And so kind of over time, after interacting with trans people, she decided that ongoing for her education, even though she was kind of at a temporary placement, that she was just so touched that she wanted that to be kind of her plight going forward. And so she wanted to gather trans folks together in Sacramento and find resources and create this organization that is now Gender Health Center, to where trans folks can serve by and for themselves, and to make sure that they actually have something for themselves that previously didn't exist, back before GHC was created, because we are the only trans-led organization like ours in Sacramento still to this day, and it's been 10 years. And so over time, Danelle was able to meet with the original founders of GHC, who are no longer with us. And before GHC was able to open, unfortunately, Danelle passed away in her sleep, only in her 30s. Oh, wow. And so her dream was continued on by the folks that she interacted with and transformed to what GHC is today. And so over time, GHC has seen a lot of changes. As recently as last year, we have changed our organizational structure. We kind of got rid of our ED. We've changed the way our organization focuses on trans people. Before, it was a lot of typical Californian liberal lip service around being inclusive to communities, but not actually representing that within and outside the organization. And so I can definitely say, even just within this year, we've had a lot of transformative changes in terms of our staff truly being a majority of queer trans people of color now, which it never has been in the history of GHC. And like Ome said, prioritizing Black trans people, who we know are the most impacted when it comes to adversities faced by people across the board. And it's a lot more than just saying it, but representing that within our organization. Someone like me, who's Black, trans, young, I'm only 24, able to have a position of power and collective power within an organization where I'm not, under someone trying to take control over me. And so I think GHC is, in one token, it's we offer services, we are a service provider, but in another, we are also symbolic to our community. And one thing that sets us apart is that we're pretty fucking radical, and we don't really give a fuck who we make mad, in terms of constantly pushing the boundary of, okay, we are a nonprofit. How far can we be our true selves within this structure and giving back to our community? And we're constantly doing that, and kind of being the ones to lead that, because we are our community, and we are the most marginalized of our community running this organization now. And I think that's it reflects.
Can you talk a little bit more about how trans people of color, and in particular trans Black folks, are more likely to deal with things like violence, or that why do they require more focus?
There's so many ways that I can answer that question, and like my sociology brain is starting to kick in because I'm a soc major. And I think, and this has come up too recently in a conversation I had with someone personally, I think it really starts at the point of humanization. And that when we look at trans people in this nation and we look at Black people in this nation, both of these entities, these beings, are dehumanized. And so if you already have an intersection that is inhuman and you have a double one that's inhuman, what are you to the rest of society, and how is society interacting with you? We also know that, you know, naturally in the world, there's got to be someone on top and there's got to be someone on bottom. That's called stratification in sociology. And Black people and trans people are stratified as a very bottom rung of our society. And it's done so intentionally to make sure that this perception of limited resources, I should say, is guaranteed for the top, and that the bottom doesn't even really get a trickle down. It's more so like the scraps of scraps. And so when it comes to things like healthcare, especially in this country, which is absolutely just a farce, it's hard for our people to get what they need, just basic needs, not even anything having to do with gender identity, but just being seen as a human being, trying to exist, trying to live, trying to find housing. And I think one big part of it is the healthcare aspect, just due to the fact that in our country, particularly, you really have to have a job in order to acquire even shitty insurance. And so what does that look like if you're not even getting hired because you're a trans person and you can't even get into the door and get your application passed for you to even get the shitty insurance? And then you look at the stats, which we know are underreported anyways, and they are all terrible and low in every regard for trans people. And to where one I can cite is that the trans people who do have the privilege of having insurance, at least 55% of them are denied basic services and primary care just off the bat of their identity, not because of anything documented, not because that they did anything incorrectly, not because they don't even have insurance, but just because they're trans off bat.
So can I stop you there and just ask a follow-up question? When you say basic services, can you explain to everybody what that means?
Basic services such as just having your correct name, your correct pronouns, having someone actually see you and listen to you and take you seriously when you're talking about the things that you're facing in your life, not having your gender identity tied to other things that are irrelevant to what you're trying to be seen for. You know, not having a doctor say that they don't serve people like you, or that they don't have any other patients like you, so they don't know how to interact with you or do anything or even talk to you. You know, things of that nature, or sometimes even lying to you about the services that you can get. One common theme that I used to run into when I was an advocate is doctors just really don't know shit. It, like, collectively, they just don't know shit. And a lot of them are trained in a very old way, and
they think they know everything, which makes
they think they know
worse.
everything, and it just compounds this thought where they don't update their reading and their education. They are stuck in the old ways when we're living where we're living now. Mm-hmm. And you get doctors who are like, oh, I don't do trans stuff, or oh, I don't know how to do hormones for trans people. And it's like, you literally are a doctor. So that means that you got training to know how to read hormones and to draw blood, which is literally the only thing you need to do to do hormones, is to know what your blood levels are, to make sure there's no any adverse effects or any family history that would affect that, to make sure that you're not smoking tobacco or alcohol while you're undergoing hormone therapy. It's like basic stuff. And cisgender people who also experience different hormonal levels and also seek hormone therapy do not have to go through the same steps and barriers or even outright denial for the same exact service that a doctor knows how to do.
Yeah. This reminds me immediately of the story of Evan Michael Minton, who was he's a local, he works in politics here in I believe in the Capitol, and he was denied a ovarial hysterectomy because Dignity Health is a quote unquote religious medical institution. And Ome, you were talking about trans competency. So what I'm hearing from both of you is that this is a real fucking problem broadly throughout medicine. And what really strikes me is that you're the only ones here in our city providing the services that are really needed, that actually adhere to the Hippocratic oath of, not harming your patients.
Yeah, I kind of want to add to what Ayotunde was saying too. In the example of COVID, right now, when we talk about primary care, the federal law is that you can deny people a ventilator on the basis of their transness. So if you are a trans,
What?
Wait.
yeah, this is the law.
It's like written down on the what?
It passed federally, and it was I'm under the understanding that it was a some kind of presidential signing situation, something. I know it's shocking, but yeah, if you are a trans person or if you are queer identified, but especially this is targeted at trans people, if you are a trans identified person, if you say that you are trans and you have COVID-19 and you're COVID positive, you can be denied a ventilator if you are requiring intensive care. And now I want to couple that with the reality that COVID-19 Black patients in New York, the incredible amount of disproportionate death and, in my opinion, murder that happened to Black folks. If you pair that with transness, then you're looking at a really bad situation for a trans Black person if they caught COVID. I would like to know, and I don't know, but I would like to know the statistics involved in if you are a Black trans patient who's COVID positive, what your likelihood is of surviving COVID-19. And I would guarantee it. I would bet like blood, money, life on it that if you are a Black trans person, there is a high likelihood that you will not get the care you need and you will probably die. And something that I think is really interesting about that is that doctors call Gender Health Center to doctors. We're not medical professionals. We're not, we are literally just advocates. They call us to learn about how to give trans people hormones. They call us to learn about how to use proper pronouns. They call us to talk to us about legal name and gender changes. They call us about like legalities involve surgery letters. Most doctors that I talk to do not know that you don't require letters anymore for hormones. And like, so the disproportionate amount of like ignorance around trans people and trans legislation is literally absurd. I personally have never partaken in any kind of medical transition, largely because I don't feel safe doing that in this country. I have no interest in putting myself at risk. So my job is making it to where nobody who's coming up the way that I did when I was a kid feels the way that I do. So that's what my job is. And I think that that's what really Ayotunde's job is too. And that's what the Gender Health Center's job is. And I say this all the time. When I was at 18, I would have given my left leg to have met somebody who worked at Gender Health Center, or to met somebody who was like the people that work at Gender Health Center, just to be able to have a referral short list of trans competent primary care providers. We also sign people up for primary care providers too, who are trans competent at GHC with our advocacy program, which, by the way, is underfunded.
I was gonna throw that out there too. Listen, I was about to get him.
Yeah.
Funding, and we it's officially not funded as of January. Our advocacy program, which literally teaches people how to navigate primary care. So yeah, we're applying for grants and stuff, but hey, Giving Tuesday's coming up. I'm just gonna plug us. Like, Giving Tuesday's coming up. Please do. If you have some extra cash, we have $15 membership subscriptions. There are gonna be some sweet prizes. We have a rap show that's gonna be happening and a gala and all that. But yeah, we really need this program funded, and it needs to stay alive. And there's just so much, there's so much going on when it comes to trans safety and the reality of like what's happening to us.
Yeah. And I think we'll dive a lot more deeper into that too in a bit here. But I wanted to just take a moment and hear from both of you kind of your journey into who you are today and to how you found the Gender Health Center, because Ome, you were mentioning that you wish you had met someone at 18 from GHC.
Well, I guess I can start, but actually, so what's really interesting is that Ayotunde actually got hired at GHC before I did. And Ayotunde plugged me to Gender Health Center. So Ayotunde got me hired at GHC. We've been really close friends for a really long time. And Ayotunde knows that like I'm honestly like I am a lofty, very like GHC, we employ really lofty, really self-driven, really aggressive people with the specific intention of understanding that our boundaries for like what we're able to do are really limited. So I thought that was like, Ome is a dog. Let's get her started. Like, you know, so that's how I got hired at GHC. And I actually got hired as a front desk person. So I can tell you pretty quickly, the staff, you know, wanted me to have more power because, you know, I think that it requires for all of us to have a lot of power to be able to do what we do, and to have the whole staff behind you. It feels really strong. But yeah, the way that I came to GHC was literally like, I was like, hey, who's hiring right now? I'm about to resign from my dental office job that I work at as a receptionist. I want to do something that's more fulfilling. And it was like, hey, let me plug you. So that's how I started. And I think that it was actually literally the most shocking culture change that I have ever experienced. To be able to go into a job and be 100% fully myself, use all 3 pronouns, use the name that I like, use the dialogue that I like, not hide my accent, not hide like, you know, a lot of the way that I talk, and not really concern myself too much with academic professionalism. That made me feel great, because my receptionist voice, she went to Harvard, she's a white girl, and you know, she knows a lot more about everything else than I do, and and when I'm at GH 100% myself, I'm not very cautious about the way that I'm talking. I'm not very cautious about what I say, and I'm pretty lofty too. So I like that about myself, and I like being myself in my job, and I think that's probably the most shocking thing that happened. But yeah, I love my job. I love my coworkers. They're mostly my friends, and I love the community that I work for. It's really dope.
Love all of that. Yeah. Let's see. So how did I start at GHC? So before I was at GHC, I was a in-home caregiver for 5 years. So a lot of my previous experience was still kind of healthcare centered. And as far as like caregiving goes, I think people think of kind of 2 things. A lot of people think of like a babysitter for hire when they hear caregiving. I wasn't doing that. I was more so doing like, I actually was more like a CNA without being paid like I was a CNA, but still having CNA duties and training without the certificate kind of a thing. So I was doing intensive stuff like, you know.
Yeah, it's an acronym alert. What's a CNA for the listeners?
Certified nursing assistant. So I was doing, you know, wound refreshing when it came to if folks have light wounds, bandaging. I was doing feeding, bathing, grooming, groceries, taking them to appointments, advocating for them, medication, behavioral plans.
That's intense work that does not get paid as much as it deserves.
And
Absolutely.
I also just have to call Ayotunde out, because they're not as old as they seem. And so, you know, when they say like, oh yeah, I was doing this for 5 years, I was like, what were you, 12?
I like started out right after high school. Like
wow.
I graduated high school in 2014. So I know that probably makes a lot of y'all feel old. I graduated high school in 2014.
So did I.
14.
Same.
When I was 18. And I immediately like jumped straight into college that summer. And my cousin who I was raised with is autistic. He's 7 years older than me. His name is Fernando. And he needed a respite care worker same time as I became 18, a new one. And so my aunt decided, why don't you go ahead and do that since you already hang out with him anyway? And that's just what the job is. That one is just a babysitter for hire. And so I did that, and then started working at actual agencies. And so I did that for quite a long time, and it did take a lot of emotion out of me and energy, because it was mostly emotional labor. I have no issue with people's like bodily fluids or cleaning, anything like that. It doesn't bother me. I just don't do throw up. That's my one boundary. I don't do vomit, but I'll do anything else. And I was getting burnt out. I really was kind of at the end of my rope, and I was working so much because there was a law that was passed where back then in caregiving, you could work as many hours as you were scheduled. Some of us lived with our clients for a temporary amount of time or for the week, and then went home on the weekend until they made it like a 40-hour cap thing. And so my money kind of got short, and I was getting burnt out taking care of people. And towards the end of my career, I switched to an agency that was senior care, because the beginning of it was mostly developmentally disabled folks of all ages. And then the end of my career before GHC was seniors, everyone 60 plus. Most of them had dementia, Alzheimer's, or I was doing hospice work. And so for viewers, hospice essentially means in that field of work that client has anywhere from day of assignment to about 6 months of life left. So I did that, and GHC, there was a job opening that popped up, and I had a friend who used to work there who like sent it to me and was like, Ayo, you need to apply to this. Like, you're perfect for this. You have to do it. And I was like, I don't think that I'm qualified for this, but if you're saying so, and it's like the deadline's tomorrow, I'm gonna apply. So I applied, and I got the job, and I was already doing BLM Sacramento work at that point in time. And so I was already kind of known in the local Sacramento activist scene.
That's how I met you, I think.
Blossom from there.
Same.
Yeah, definitely. I remember the stuff on Clark.
Yeah.
Protest. I saved your neck.
Yeah, we can get into that story later. That was interesting. Yeah, so the reason that we scheduled this episode in particular is because the day that this episode is going to publish is going to be the Transgender Day of Remembrance. So can you tell us a little bit about what that is and why it's important?
Yeah, so Trans Day of Remembrance, which we like to call TDOR, is basically, it's exactly what it sounds like. So many of us die from violence that we feel like we deserve a day where we memorialize all of our folks. And the main purpose of it is to kind of commiserate and to kind of share a community grief. And that's kind of what we do on that day. And it's actually a whole week. Just Trans Day of Remembrance ends at it finishes off the week. Week of awareness is like the whole week. So it starts at this Monday, and then TDOR is on this Friday.
That was okay. So why don't we talk about how the trans conversation has changed over the last few years? I feel like I've seen a big difference, and I feel like the trans advocate community has really moved the conversation forward. When I was a kid, this was just not a thing that was really talked about that much, almost to a degree that like in movies they made jokes about it, right? So can you talk about the progress that's been made, what's good and what really still needs a whole lot of work, and how can folks help in that fight?
Well, I mean, I hate to like be a pessimist, but if you ask me, like every single thing, how I was talking before about this culture shock that I had when I worked at GHC. The culture shock was, it felt like I went into a world where like people were people and not just like horrible self-interested narcissists who practice white supremacy. Like that's how dramatic the shift was. It felt like I went into another fucking country. Like it literally is so completely different to work at GHC from on the day-to-day that like some of my friends make jokes that like I work in a cult. They're like, you like totally like you're like the life that you experience is totally different, and like the way that my values have changed dramatically. It's everything is so different that I think that method, the way that we apply the ethics that we hold in our hands, right? These ideas about intersectionality, about, centering particularly Black femmes of color, or Black trans femmes, I mean. When you actually put that into practice, it looks very different than the way that people talk about it. Right? It looks and feels very different. It doesn't turn out to be in the way that people think that it's going to turn out to. And a lot of times these conversations start coming up in the workplace that are like, how do we talk about this thing ethically? And that's how our conversations start. So it's not the same culture. So when you're used to like operating inside of this kind of idea of intersectionality and, sort of echoing all of these like ethical ideas, right? And you step out into the world, everything seems like the fucking Stone Age. Like it's so dramatic. And I think that as far as like changes need to go, like the absolute core of our country needs to change in order for there to be like a meaningful change. Something that I have noticed a lot more is that the youth, and I mean people that are younger than me and Ayotunde even, I really, really appreciate them. Folks that are like, 17, 18, they're talking about these like really revolutionary concepts, right? They're like talking about like, hey, my pronouns are they, them, and they're not optional, and they're having these conversations. And I see that like on TikTok and stuff where these kids are like yelling at their parents about like Black Lives Matter, and they're having these like super like evolved discussions, and it's these young people that are sort of pioneering these ways that their parents should be thinking already, but they're not. And it's just like that, I think, is the most delightful thing that I've seen, and the most dramatic change is it's in the youth, right? Like these really young people, they have these really strong, beautiful ideas. But that's people my age when I was like a kid, like the people, my peers, they were not as cool as these young kids are. They were not as woke. They were not as ready. They were not ready to put their lives on the line the way some of these young people have. And like Dave, this is not even the first story that I've ever heard about Ayotunde saving somebody's neck. Like this is just like how young people are now. They're changing dramatically, and I think that they're tired of like, people like Trump. I think that they're tired. They come from like this generation of like school shootings. Now they experience COVID-19. These young people, this is where they come from, so they want the world to change.
I actually have a question about, like, I think Gender Health Center for me has been such a resource in terms of like, in terms of like, we're talking about TDOR, you said Trans Day of Remembrance, and Gender Health Center is a space that affords the community so much that really, like, the truth is that Gender Health Center shouldn't have to educate cishet people on all of this, because your mission is to center trans folks, the people that you serve, right? But here we are having this conversation, and so one, it's just a gratitude moment for the work that you all do. And the other thing that I've been thinking a lot about, especially now as people take the streets and we're talking about the violence that is inflicted upon trans folks, I think about, and you bring up intersectionality, I think about the intersections of trans identity and carcerality. and what it might look like for someone who is out taking the streets, potentially for something like TDOR or something like BLM or something like standing up against, you know, the Proud Boys who show up at the Capitol. If I think about what it means for potentially someone who is trans getting locked up, like like the terrible things that happen to a trans person in the carceral system. And I know we're sort of like nearing the end of our show, but I want to bring that up and wonder, one, if you can speak to that a little bit so that people understand how important it is, especially for cis het people, to get out in front of and take on like the things that could happen to trans folks so that you don't end up fucking locked up. And then also just like how and where more information could be found on that topic in particular.
There's yeah, I'll let you take this one actually.
Yeah, I'll let Ome plug the resources because they probably have more direct stuff. I'm a little bit more abstract. But I think the position and kind of like that sentiment that you expressed is something that I personally live, particularly because I am one of the most visible Black trans non-binary people in Sacramento, and only continue to grow more visible. And that's
not just because you're 6'4".
Yeah, and exactly, not just because I'm 6'4". But I've been, doing at least local activism for, about 3 to 4 years now, since I started with BLM around that time and kind of made my way around. And I myself have experienced like police letting me know that they know who I am and that they're watching me and that they know my name before I got my name changed, as they explicitly have called me out in public before doing that, and things of that nature. And I think for me, knowing all the risks that come with being a Black trans person, but additionally, in my position, I'm someone that was assigned male at birth. And so the majority of my experience, 'cause I've only been out for about 3 years since I've been doing activism, is that of a Black man as well. And so I have a double experience of what it's like to experience this world walking through being seen as a Black man. And I also have the experience of being seen as a Black trans femme. And for both of those identities and intersections, it's constant danger. It's constant risk, and it's constant projection that you're going to cause danger regardless of what you're doing. And I think particularly to me being from South Sacramento, which we also like to call South Sac, Iraq, for the reasoning that, we out here are so used to sirens and guns and people dying and gang violence and all these things, like where I come from, I'm very proud of. But at the same time, there's a lot that I've experienced and a lot that I've faced. And I've definitely had to like fight for respect. And so I think for me, advocating for other people and being willing to throw everything on the line is inevitable, because for someone like me, like violence has already occurred and is going to occur statistically and just realistically. And so I am more of like, I'm not going to do everything I need to do to try to avoid this. What I'm going to do is take a stand while I can and not assume that tomorrow is promised. And when I go down, however I go down, whether it's naturally or by the state, that the people that I inspired and the people that were in my circle understand and kind of carry the torch of what I'm trying to do and the way that I'm trying to exist. And knowing like, at the end of the day, like if I gotta fight, I gotta fight. It's been done before. Like if I need to fight someone for anything, for any kind of defense or protection over myself, over someone else, or over just the ideals that I stand by, I have and will do that always. But I can also say that not everyone has that same experience and not everyone has that same capacity. And I think the importance of that is to say, if you're really down, you have to be ready to risk it all, because when it comes down to war and things of that nature, whether it's like a literal war or like a philosophical war between ideals and values, there's going to be bloodshed, and inevitably. Like you can't pretend that pacifism is an actual ideal that's going to manifest and is going to be long term, there's going to be violence, and you need to figure out, like, if you're going to be harmed in that violence, are you going to transmute that same energy into protection, or are you just going to be another victim? And that you actually do have the choice to some degree in how you're going to play that role. And I think that's really the heart of it for me personally.
Yeah. And to kind of jump off of that and talk about resources, the truth and the reality behind activists, especially trans activists, the current rules, and as I was talking about trans youth, they have sent out a ton of social media posts about how to protect your trans friends. And one of them is, if your trans friend is about to be arrested, you sit in with your trans friend, and there should be people of both of the perceived sexes depending on which jail cell they'll think that they're going to go to, so that way they get imprisoned together, and that way nobody's alone. That's the first step. There's also, obviously, like, this is not necessarily my advice. I don't know legally what I can say. So just bear this in mind, but a lot of people do this thing called boosting, where they like launch themselves into the person that's being arrested, and they wrap their body around that person, and they yank them from the officer and run. And that's really, really common. And the main reason for that is because of the extreme disproportionate violence that happens in regards to sexual violence. And this is not inmate to inmate violence. What we're talking about is actually police officer to inmate violence, and trans women, especially Black trans women, are disproportionately likely to experience this sexual violence. And the experiences that I've heard from other Black trans women, obviously I can't speak for them, but the experiences that I've heard have heavily centered like this kind of fetishism from police officers, and like using this like violent sense of curiosity about trans women's bodies to assault them. And so a lot of like what's been happening behind closed doors has been this kind of there's just this extreme sense of very personal, intimate violence on behalf of the police, and on behalf of the people who are allowing for the police to do this kind of stuff, because there's just no resources. But yeah, the current status quo as far as what activists are trying to do is just take people away from the police as much as possible, and use your body to shield especially Black trans women and trans folks. And the whole concept is like, let no trans person go to a prison cell alone.
Yeah. Here locally, to bring it back to our region, I know that during the Stuff on Clark protests, we had a trans woman, Black woman, who was arrested, and she was misgendered, and she was put in the wrong population. And this, of course, is by our sheriff, Scott Jones.
Friend of the show.
Yeah. And then also you mentioned boosting, and that reminds me immediately of when a young woman of color went to save a friend a few years back who was being arrested by Sac PD, and they ended up charging her with what was the term? They charged her with lynching.
What?
Yeah.
Yeah, they charged her with lynching.
And this is a young Black woman, and it's just really fucked up. And it just kind of tells you the way our system works
sinister.
In this region.
Holy shit.
Yeah, we live in dark times. Like, it's like almost cartoonish. We live like in like trans people that get to experience the worst parts of people. So everybody's a cartoon villain to us. Like, we're just like trying to like live and like eat our salad, and like people are like, let me just like literally commit a like inhumane atrocity of epic disproportion. And I think that's like, I think that's the experience of Black women in general, but definitely, especially Black trans women. And I remember what you're talking about, Dave. I was actually there, and the whole community got together, and we were all outside protesting. We had poets there all night. spitting bars at the police to let, this Black trans woman go. And they ended up doing it. Like, a lot of that is also just like the community is really insistent. Like, thankfully,
very important. Yeah.
So yeah, thankfully Sacramento's really dope. But I can't say that, like, if she was in Texas or if she was in somewhere in the Bible Belt, that would happen for her.
Right. Well, one thing that we kind of like to do towards the end of our show is give our listeners sort of a picture of what, like, if they would like to, like, be an ally or help to further a cause, like what they can do. And obviously you guys have already answered a lot of that in terms, I mean, which is always, I think, probably the best advice, which is use your privilege to put yourself in front of people, in between people who don't have that same privilege and the police, and which obviously is fantastic advice. Is there anything else that, like, that cis people who are not plugged in, who would like to be plugged in, who want to be allies, who want to be accomplices, like, what can folks do who kind of are not plugged in?
The first thing you can do is find out about trans resources, learn about your family and friends that are trans, and connect those two, right? Like, I think that the first and foremost thing that you have to do is know who in your life is trans. And if they don't feel comfortable telling you that they're trans, then you need to figure out what your problem is. And then go from there. So I think that that's the first step, is, like, first figuring out who in your life that you already love is trans, because I promise you have some trans friends and family. So putting yourself out there as an ally, that in and of itself is a challenge. And to bring meaningful change, be aware of organizations like us. Link us to people who are coming to Sacramento. Look for other trans organizations. I just learned about one in Colorado today. And learn about these trans organizations and refer people who are moving out of Sacramento who are trans into these organizations, vet them, make sure that you have, like, a resource list. Like, we're going to do our best at GHC, of course, but we're staffed by 13 people. So there's not so many of us that can, keep track of everything. But if you know something, or if you know somebody that's going to take care of somebody who's trans, or somebody who is trans that you want to take care of, just be extremely acutely aware of what's happening.
Yeah, I want to answer that too. Flo, you had something to say?
Oh, I was going to put you on the spot, but go ahead and answer this one. And then I have something else I'm going to ask you.
Okay. So relating to this question in particular, I think that one of the most important things, I guess for white folk too, but I'm saying this more so for queer people of color and people of color in general, particularly Black people, is doing ancestral research and, like, real research, and recognizing that prior to European colonization and friends, TM, that the majority of this entire planet believed in and worshipped and honored and respected beyond a gender binary. Like, this gender binary, this man, woman, this everything has to have two stuff, is actually more new and recent in our human history than things like being a non-binary. And we do have documentation from all over. I think one misconception that I like to point out, as someone that identifies as Nigerian American, is that, one, indigenous doesn't just mean people native to this country, and for two, that those are not the only people who have a diversity of gender, because, again, everywhere, particularly Africa, which is where humanity started, which is not debatable and has also been documented. And, my ancestors who come from West Africa largely, and particularly the area that is now Nigeria today, have and worshipped a pantheon of gods called Orisha, who acknowledged the energies of femininity and masculinity and even more beyond that, containing a language where even my own name, Ayotunde, which means joy has returned, is gender neutral. There aren't any he's or she's in that language. when you're referring to something, the pronoun is oh. And oh is like they or it or that thing. Everything is oh when you're talking to Nigerian people. And I think that's super important because once we learn and we go back to our roots and we decolonize everything, not just like gender identity, but like these roles and these boxes that we've been forced in collectively, and this like way of life that's said to be the only way has never been the way. Like it's never been that way. This is very recent, and this how we operate comes from a documented sinister campaign of bloodshed and control and taking away people's autonomy and literally trying to destroy their history. And so honestly, like for me, people who in this day and age fall into things like compulsory heterosexuality, which is the belief that everyone is automatically straight, and compulsorily thinking that everyone's cisgender is really foolish because it just shows that you're ignorant. And I don't say ignorant in jest, I mean ignorant as in the literal definition of lacking education and information, is that once you start to dig deep and really reflect, it really doesn't make sense to assume that humans who are so genetically diverse and intellectually diverse would ever be trapped in something like a binary or something as simple and reductive to reproduction as heterosexuality. But that's my take, is to really just like dig deep and question what you thought you knew, because half the people that I talk to, whether they're trans or cisgender, don't even know the difference between sex and gender somehow. So obviously there's been a collective miscommunication in the way that we've been taught, because that's the start of the confusion, is people think that they're the same thing, and people think that genitalia is gender when genitalia is sex. And if you can't understand that very basic thing, we can't get anywhere with the conversation or growth, because you're not understanding the foundation. The same way talking to a white person about anything that has to do with racism is pointless if they've never even thought of the word white privilege or considered it. Like the white guys who hear white privilege for the first time when they're like 35 and they're like, oh, okay, I get it now. And it's like, yeah, you get it now. And that means for 35 years, you've been acting a fucking fool.
And you're being optimistic saying, oh, I get it now, because usually it's like, no, I work.
It doesn't come off that way usually.
Yeah.
Right.
Usually, oh, I get it now. Like it's usually a long time before that light bulb comes on if you're hearing it for the first time.
I'll throw a little sugar on it.
Yeah. Ayotunde, I wanted to, while we were doing the wrap up before we get to the real close, I wanted to, and I'm glad you mentioned, being Nigerian American, because normally when I see a video on Facebook that is like 20 minutes long and I am in the middle of my day, I do not click on it. But something about your video said, click on it and listen. And I, sure enough, while I was making my lunch, listened to your entire video when you were talking about end SARS. And I just wanted to give you this platform to be able to talk about it, because I think it really connects nicely to the global experience of Blackness, the global experience of people experiencing non-binariness and queerness, right? And so I wanted you to have an opportunity to educate, because I don't think it has gotten nearly the traction or attention that it needs to. And it connects a lot to BLM and just, what's happening all over the world in terms of pushing back against oppressive power. So I wanted to make sure I primed you to say something about SARS in Nigeria.
Thank you. Yeah, so in Nigeria right now, they have this, individual police unit called SARS that was originally created to help the community and curb, this influx of theft that was happening between community on community members. And initially, it worked. Initially, people stopped attacking each other, and there was that momentary like breath of fresh air and peace. And of course, any group given autonomy and power with weaponry over citizens is going to turn corrupt. And so that's what happened with SARS. And so over time, SARS was created as this beacon for the people and ended up as one of their own oppressors. And with SARS, similar to police departments and law enforcement in this nation, they do things like extortion, They steal from people, they kidnap people, they arrest people just off of the way they look or dress. If you look like you're wearing too rich of clothing, you can just get picked up and taken to an unknown location and just interrogated and questioned and then let go. And then being unable to report it to anyone because no one's going to believe you. Some people just go missing, never to return again. Especially, you know, having leftovers from colonialism in Nigeria, being homosexual, being queer in any kind of fashion is still criminalized and supported by legislation. And so even if you're a heterosexual man who may have too dangly of an earring, if they view you or perceive you as being gay, you can be beaten, you can be killed, you can be mobbed, and it be, you know, justified. We also have women, as always, being targets from men in power, being taken advantage of sexually, emotionally, you know, everything that I previously listed. And so there's kind of this influx of just violence that's been occurring. And Nigerian people, especially Nigerian youth, which have constantly been centered in this particular campaign of End SARS, have been like, you know what, we're not dealing with this anymore. We can see, you know, through social media and kind of the world order right now that people are fighting back, and we are going to fight back. This isn't something that culturally, you know, people don't want to shake the table in a lot of other countries, but you know, these youth are like, no, we're going to shake the table. And a lot of them are not only just young, but they're queer. And the risk that I have here is nothing compared to the risk that my queer Nigerian siblings have in Nigeria. Like here, I can go out and say and claim that I can fight someone and be okay. If I was in Nigeria doing the same thing, I'd have to fight people and the police just for being queer. At least here, the police aren't just shooting me for being queer off bat. Like they're not that crazy. And, you know, there's just so many things that we see here that are compounded and reflected in the plight that's in Nigeria. And they have so much less resources and so much more to lose, and are going harder than I've seen, you know, people here go in the streets. And it's really inspiring and it's really touching. And it's also unfortunate because for me, being someone that is Nigerian American, my connection to Africa and my connection to Nigeria is because my ancestors were the ones who were stolen and enslaved. And that is the reason why I was born in this country and not that country. And to see that my own people back in their homeland are still dealing with the same exact things I'm dealing with in where I was the one that's a descendant of slaves, and they're the ones who are born in our, you know, our homeland, our country, and they're facing the same exact thing that I am facing. They're getting beat like I'm getting beat out here. They're getting maced like I'm getting maced out here when it comes to protesting and things like that. There's blood being shed here, like there's blood being shed there. And I guess for me, it's kind of unfortunate and inspiring at the same time, just because it's like, damn, like it's been 400 years and like this is where I'm at here in America, and that's where my people are at in their own home. Like you don't even have to leave Africa to get mistreated because now your own people are emulating this white supremacy, and your people who look like you, because it's not like it's just white cops beating on Nigerian people. These are Nigerian officers taking advantage of other Nigerian people. And so we can see how deep these things can go. And I think it's kind of wild how we just see things repeat in history and like all over. Like it's not any one place that's kind of going through it. We're all collectively going through it. But I think, you know, that being said, I do have privilege as an American. And so for me, looking over at what I call my home country and seeing that they're going through it, I know that I can also help, even though I'm going through it here too. And I think that collectively people can do it and shout it out and boost things. Like we all are dealing with a lot. There's a lot of bullshit going on constantly, but I think people get too comfortable, and it's almost like people get too comfortable and being or feeling like they don't have worth to help. And so they stay like that. And I think we need to do a lot more work of getting out of that and being like, well, what can I do to help people, instead of like, oh, I can't do all these things, because nothing drives me more insane than someone who I know is way more privileged than me, which is the majority of people based on intersections, telling me how inspiring that I can be when they can barely share a fucking GoFundMe from a Black trans person. Like, I have been through so much stuff that people still don't know to this day that I've been through, that I know they would break immediately. And that's not to say that I'm just some special, powerful person. That means that I know that if I can get through it, people who have been through less traumatic things than I have and have much more financial latitude and privilege can do the same thing. And so I think we have to really get to the position of pushing people and being like, you know what? I see that this is hard for you, but I'm gonna need you to do better. And I'm gonna need you to step up. And baby, if you're feeling anxious, find some weed, find your vice, do something. Because I think too, with a lot of allies and advocates, both to the trans community, the Black community, the Nigerian community, people are always just like asking what they can do, and like, it's just like very lazy, kind of just like, let me just pretend that I care and not actually like do the actual work. And it's like, dude,
right. And honestly, agitation, the onus is on you for some reason. Yeah,
exactly. Right. Like, there's literature, and anything that I can possibly say has already been said. Like, slavery alone, like, you have at least, truly, because it's been longer than that, but you got at least 4 centuries of documentation, of literature, of poetry, of music, of tombstones, of literally anything you can find in seconds on Google. And so I think that really people are getting lazy. And I've noticed that with this year too, and with everything happening with Nigeria, with the George Floyd protests earlier this year, with COVID, with the Trump administration and what they've been doing just the whole entire time. And I just feel like I'm exhausted. I'm like, damn, I'm 24 and this is the world that I have to live in. Like, dude, I'm not putting up with this shit. I'm not putting up with anyone's bullshit anymore. And I want to be real, and I want to be down for my people. And that looks like being loud, and that looks like fighting, and that looks like calling people out and holding people accountable. And I think really that's just that's just like where I'm at with it. And that campaign for me was just like, I saw it and I was like, I have to do something. Like, I'm Nigerian American. My people are suffering. What do I look like seeing this and pretending that I don't see it and not using my voice to uplift it, even if I'm not from Nigeria personally and I don't know anyone down there? Let me find some Nigerians and organize and get some money to people. And that's what I did.
And it's not only is it commendable, but I think it's a testament to recognizing the intersections even between movements. I know, I'm an epidemiologist, and so when I first saw NSARS trending, I was like, fuck yeah, NSARS. And then I was like, oh, not that SARS, but also
different.
a different kind.
Absolutely. Whatever it stands for, end it. Yes, I'm in agreement. So I was really grateful for you just putting that together and elevating those issues and talking about the intersection. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Is that video publicly accessible? Can we link to that in the show notes?
Yeah, I think it's probably like a Facebook Live. I'm pretty sure it's public. I'll try to look for it and then I'll send it to you. Feel free. Cool. I like get a little emotional in between like talking, but
that's part of your power.
It's powerful.
Thank you so much. And honestly, thank both of you for coming on and for talking with us about just something that's really important and that's not spoken about enough. The Gender Health Center does just phenomenal work, and I've been covering on and off some of it over the years, and it's just really cool to see where you all are today.
And
thank you so much.
Can we just as a reminder to our listeners who are interested in financial support for GHC, Giving Tuesday is coming up on December 1st. So where can they find you in order to make a donation for Giving Tuesday?
So there's a few places that you can actually find us. The obvious one is Facebook. So if you go to Gender Health SAC on Facebook, we're right there. And the event name for that, for Giving Tuesday specifically, is called the Rebirth Gala. And it's kind of a play on a gala because, we're GHC, so we're kind of like the anarchist nonprofit of Sacramento. But we are hosting a quote unquote gala, but basically it's a bunch of rappers and they're and like a couple other musicians who are doing like punk rock stuff. And they are probably gonna wear like a bow tie or something, and that's the gala part. But yeah, so they're doing that, and it's supposed to be really, really fun. So you can find us there, and there's a link to our Mighty Cause on there. I'll also forward that to y'all for your notes. But yeah, you can get connected through there, and of course Instagram. All of our handles are the same. It's at Gender Health Sac on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. We're also on TikTok, though we haven't posted anything, so don't hold us to that. But yeah, check it out, and yeah, and get involved in the membership program. Like, hey, support us long term. We offer programs and services to all folks with a special focus on trans people of color, for sure. But we help all of our community, and I just want to make that clear. Like, all in-house people, they show up at our respite program, and everybody gets lunch. We don't hold any resources from anybody. So yeah.
Yeah, I just want to drive home to listeners. These are people who save lives in this work, and so if you and when you donate to them, like, you can do that knowing that.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Yeah. And our respite program is actually set up as a alternative to the emergency room, and our counseling program specializes in crisis care for trans people of color. So we do a lot of really dope stuff, and our job is very, very, very difficult, but also really, really, really cool.
Yeah. I think we're almost at the end then. Ayotunde, do we even have time to tell the story of how we met?
I think the people must know.
So do you want to go first or do I? Because we
can do it.
So my first memory of you was one of the first Stefan Clark marches. And I believe it was the day that you all took the freeway. Mm-hmm. And then after taking the freeway, there was a little dance party over at the Doko sign, which was very fun. And then it went up to the arena, the Sacramento Kings arena, and they basically shut down the possibility of anybody getting into the arena for the Kings game. I think it was still on TV and whatever, but I think there were like 1,000 people in the entire arena. But as that was happening, keep in mind, the Stefan Clark protests were just starting. I was and I still am, a very white guy. And I remember that day, I think I was like wearing like a pea coat, and I had a haircut that looked real fashy. And I had my notebook out, and I was taking notes. You do notes for color just as fast as you can when you're writing a story, if you're trying to like tell a scene. And you don't know if you're going to use it or not, but you're just like scribbling away. And there was an intense moment right next to the arena, and a guy next to me just like zoned in on me, and he's like, "Hey, what the fuck you writing? What are you doing, man?" And he was actually, I think he was like white or Latino, but he just immediately was like, "This guy is probably some shitty right-wing journalist or something, or like a Fed or something." And I started getting like kind of thrown around by people and pushed around. And I don't know, like, there was a lot happening at the time, but you basically snagged my little reporter's notebook and you walked off with it, and you were like reading my notes to like try and figure out who I was. And so I took out my card, walked over to you and handed it to you, and like you were like, "Oh yeah, I've heard of you." And then we talked a little bit after that, and that was my memory of the whole thing.
Yes, that sounds pretty accurate. I just remember seeing like people being like, "Who's this white guy?" like looking at us writing down these notes, and I'm like, "All right, I'm part of BLM SAC. Let me go peep and see what's going on." And like Kempa is like getting thrown around by people, and I'm like, I don't know if this is like who they even think it is, so like let me just see. And so I kind of did. I forgot that I actually snatched the notebook, but yeah. I have those moments. So I just snatched the notebook out of Kempa's hand just in case they were like some kind of right-wing dude, and was like, "Let me see that notebook," kind of a thing. And looked at the list, and then once I started reading what Kempa was writing, I was like, wait a second. And then they handed me the card, and I was like, "Kempa, I've heard this name before. You're good. He's good. Y'all can go.
Yeah. And you went and talked to the crowd afterwards, and you came over and like you double checked with me, like, yeah, you know, I think you said like they're sorry, but like they weren't coming over to tell me or anything. But like you were extremely cool. But it's just like that's when I think like early on in a movement like that, when you don't know who's going to be there, who's doing what and taking what notes, that like it's one of those things that like I never talked about publicly. I never took it personally. And I think that Black folks have every reason to not trust a white person taking notes at one of their demonstrations. So it never bothered me or anything. But yeah, thank you for saving my ass.
Yes, you're welcome.
I love it.
Well, Dave, you are a man of many stories, many takes. You've taken a lot of notes over the years for a number of subjects.
Nope.
And after hearing that story, I can't help but wonder if maybe there's a place on the internet where I can go where there's like a lot of these sort of things, you know, sorted into kind of put together to make it an easy way for me to get all of your great notes. I hear I keep hearing word about perfect takes. I don't know if I'm in the right place for that. Anyway, obviously I need a lot of help here, and I wonder if you can help me out.
Yeah, there is a place, and it's a real centerpiece of perfect takes. It's a collection, if you will. It's an Aesop's perfect take anthology, really.
I like that.
And it's at a place called voicesrivercity.com. You know, when we launched 3 years ago, it was mostly news and arts coverage. We did a lot of community essays. Currently, the iteration that we are doing today is the four of us doing our podcast, sort of speaking truth to power and getting amazing people like Ome and Ayotunde on here to talk about their truths and the work that they're doing and how they're making our community better. And that's kind of the current iteration. You can find us on every single podcast platform. Of course, you can still find us at voicesrivercity.com. You can also find us on YouTube. We're usually pretty attractive, but this is a wildly
this episode especially, yes.
Group.
Yeah.
You might want to watch this one on YouTube, folks. And so, yeah, we're on there, Voices River City, Twitter, Voices River City, Instagram, the same. Skylar runs that and always posts the weirdest shit, and I love it. We're also on Facebook as Voices River City. We are on Patreon, and we will be starting in December doing the classic socialist business model of once a week, free episode for everybody, and then once a week, if you do as low as $5 a month on the Patreon, it's an episode for the people who are helping support us. And so thank you for everyone who already does. And thank you for everybody who considers starting to do that moving on. And
just to clarify, just so it's very clear, all of the people who are already our Patreon patrons, nothing changes for you. Those of you who are not, for the low, bargain basement price of $5 a month, you can literally have twice as much of this fantastic content. So
that's a hot chocolate at that coffee lounge where that guy has problems. Actually, I won't bring them up then. Yeah, I won't name them.
Yeah, that one sucks.
Yeah,
it's literally less
they
than
had
the cost
great hot chocolate
of
though.
a notebook that somebody will take away from you while you're getting beat up at a protest.
Exactly. Exactly. So I highly recommend Voices River City. Again, that's patreon.com/voicesrivercity. I guess that's it. I am on Twitter at Kempa, YOUKNOWKEMPA.
You can find me at Guillotine for You. That's Guillotine, the number 4, YOU.
I am Shan N.D. Stevens.
And I am at Flojaune, FLOJAUNE.
And for our two guests, if you prefer, is there a way people can find you on the internet? Personally, not just Gender Health Center.
Yeah, you can find me on Instagram. I'm at oomph. That's 4 U's, UUMF. So UUUUHMF. And I'm on Twitter too, but please don't check my Twitter. It's really gross and gross.
Now that makes me want to check your Twitter more.
I think
all I want to check now. Yeah,
Twitter.
We're all pretty gross. Come on.
Like activism and like just like weird sex posts. I'm sorry.
We're positive here. Hey.
Yeah.
My Instagram is Ayokuku, and that is AYOKUKUU. It's my first and last name combined. That's also my PSN if you play on PS4. I'm a gamer.
I love it.
That's fun. That's the first guest we've had throw out their gamer handle. I like that.
Yeah, we got to start asking that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a big nerd behind closed doors, but not really. It's more out and open.
And a huge thank you to Nia of the Gender Health Center for sending over this list. Thank you so much for that. I'm so bummed we didn't get to have you on either. What is Nia's role over at Gender Health Center?
The community advocacy and mobilization coordinator for Gender Health Center.
Very cool. I hope to have her on sooner than later.
We love you, Nia.
We love you, Nia.
Thank you.